quickly kicking off turn 7 here. Two potentially out of command English ships. These guys are in command. The French were able to extend their command throughout these. French division here, that was a hard choice. I really couldn't tell where to put it. Before it had been easy, keep the tail working differently, but now it's not really clear which side is going to be the more effective. I may end up following what, say, these guys do with this ship, or this ship as well, and intend to shift them into that command later. But it doesn't hurt terribly to make the split here now. That seems to be the difference between where the French ships are going to engage and where they're not, although this one may well be engaging. All depends on what the English, how they turn into this battle. Right now it looks like they're going to be making some ground this way and a little bit that way maybe. I don't know. It's really tough to see what the English are up to. They do seem to be slicing across to crush these though, and that's something to worry about. Anyway, this one succeeded in its command check on fire and all. This one, however, did not, and he's going to be trouble. He can't move very far either, so he's kind of in the way. He may end up joining the rest of this formation if possible for next turn. We're kind of running out of time here. Only, 7, 8, 9, 10, 4 more turns left. The game takes a while to develop, and it's quite possible trailing ships in a formation may do nothing in the course of a battle with a time limit like this. Such as. And the English command over here moved first. I can't fix that without my tweezers. I slid down across both of these ships, took a lot of fire. I'm completely dismasted, on fire. That ship's probably going to fail. It did a little bit of damage to this, but nothing compared to what it's facing. It's essentially a knocked out ship at this point, which will only be able to drift. These suckers, they weren't really able to get in. I could have done a partial fire at this, but I figure it's going to move forward and I can do defensive fire on it. It's in command after all. That leaves it to the French. The English won the initiative, by the way, on another tie-dye. French ships deliver some significant fire against these two British ships, leaving them in pretty bad shape. This one got to do some defensive fire. It's the only thing there that's still in good shape, and even it's damaged. That whole little forward squadron, the van there, is fairly wrecked. On the other hand, the French ships aren't in great shape either. You can see they're not damaged yet. That's not a lot of damage. That's not okay. Maybe they are in great shape. That one's pretty hit up though. And this big boy sailed up through there too. We are getting everybody in kind of the same direction. With the one exception of this ship, which I'm not sure how my command is going to work with that, but we'll see. For the English, they basically, this is my, this was my command division. I don't know, has this guy moved? I don't think that guy's moved. So essentially, my command division is right here. These two ships are part of the French command that moved. This one is not. This whole line has not moved yet. For the English, they only have 2 things to move as far as I can see. Oh no, this guy's not moved yet. So they've got 3 different commands essentially, these two. One out of command ship, one semi out of command ship, which I have to kind of mark that way, I guess. I don't know. And then the main line back here, not working out terribly well to the English's. A hard decision with the English, but I chose to try to move this ship. Now this ship is on fire and in bad shape. He's got 2 movement points off of him. He's got 5 base, so that gives him 3 movement points, which I'm reflecting by putting a little sail there just to indicate. Now, he's got a real problem here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. No matter what he does, he's going to be in a fouled position, I think. What if he does a side slip maneuver? 1, 2. Yeah, he's going to be stuck fouling something no matter what he does. And that means he's allowed to foul, I think. got to kind of look at the rules to see that. He could back sails here, 1, and turn, 2. He can't back sail again, and then he'd be fouling in that direction. I'm just not seeing a way he can avoid getting fouled. So I think we finally got a potential collision going on. Let me look up the rules on that and see how it ends up working out. Here's how it's worded. It has to back sails as often as possible in order to burn the maximum number of movement points prior to impact. To check for a collision, roll a die and reference it on the collision table. Deduct the command qualities of any commanders available on the moving and target ships. Damn it. So I've got a 4 there, and it's really hard to cope with these counters and the camera at the same time. God damn it. Okay. So I've got a 2 off. I got to find the collision table. This is a fairly rare thing, it seems. Oh, good. It's on the back. Well, let's pull our other rule book out. Hopefully it has the same table. And, shit. Okay. So, we got a chart here. Let's see what we got. I can't read the rules and cope with the chart, so hopefully everything's on the chart. -1 per commander quality, so we have a -2. Per ship of what rate? We're looking at a 5 and a 4, so we're at -1 because it's big. It's not huge. One of the ships is damaged. We're at 0. Movement points the moving ship cannot expend. Well, I'm not sure what that means because I could sail through this and hit that or whatever. But anyway, I spend 1. I think my second move moves me into there, so I think I've got 1 extra move. So I think I'm at +1 for the foul. What happens if I don't foul? I think I stay in this hex, which is screwed up. But could I have turned 1? Oh wait, I could probably, god damn it. Maybe I can get out of this. Because this is 1 backing sails and then 2, 3, I'm like that. And I've used up all my movement. And now I can fire normally. Let's do that. I managed to get a pretty good shot off there with that white circle on the back side of a ship. That's impressive. Not many have that, I think. I'm not sure. These guys, yeah, I guess they do. All right. Couple hull hits and a rigging hit. And what's kind of nice about this was not actually an out-of-command ship. It had been at the beginning of the turn, but it saved from it. That means the French must go now. Unlike if I use this ship where the French could take a pass if they wanted. Oh, interesting situation here. I had the command split marker here. I'm assuming this thing must have moved. I'm not sure it was supposed to, but because it's fired both its broadsides. So I didn't move that. I moved these 3 ships. This guy sailed up trying for a bow rake, which he didn't get. Dealt some damage to the rigging. He's got this thing down to 12 hits on its rigging, so it's in pretty bad shape. But here's the problem. Now I've moved into this out-of-command ship next to it, fired at it. Now it's able to, well, it's able to fire is the big issue. So before it wasn't really a threat, but now it kind of is. And I can, looks like, perhaps get an aft rake. No, because I'm only going to have 1 movement point. So I'm not going to get anything exciting there. Essentially, I can back sail, and then I can't turn. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get that shot in anyhow, although I could get one in on this side, and presumably on this side, because now I am eligible to fire because I got engaged. Well, this got all screwed up because I forgot the English were beating against the wind here and did them as if they were breaching. And ended up lining up a shot against both these ships, which couldn't have happened. Anyway, After this guy fired, the French made the English go again, and they shifted forward. Nothing too exciting there, although I think I may have lost a firing opportunity from this one that I would have liked to take, but it just ended up a total screw up in terms of having to back everybody up because I moved them all 5 movement points instead of 3. Of course, I also charged more for turning, and I don't know what's going on there, but Bing has got a little bit of a mess there. Now I've got the last command here, this swing here. Now the question is, do I want to cope with turning into the wind at the Brits? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think what's going to happen is I'm going to have to shift back around with these guys and turn in on themselves again and try to get into position for this British line that's coming through the center of the French fleet, basically. Slide into turn 8. After taking effect of drift, we only had one ship that could have struck, this one here. And, well, this is where we are going into this new turn. French fleet turned and moving this way. Could have kept turning, but I think I had enough movement points left. Had I done so, though, it really wouldn't put me in any better position. So next turn I'm going to have to start shifting into beating and trying to deal with whatever's going on, and these may have to start breaking away. It's kind of this weird fight going on here with the mass of the English fleet not in play and the mass of the French fleet not in play, just because they haven't engaged with the little dogfight going on over here. Right now, 2 French ships, 1 English sunk. This guy is in a position where he might strike, but it's very unlikely. I think he needs a 9 because he has the audacity and the leader on board. Of course, the leader, next time I activate, could go flee and try to make it over to this ship. There's no chance of him dying in fleeing. He either makes it or doesn't go, which feels a little strange to me. Okay, so at the beginning of turn 8, divided up our commands. Now the English really kind of screwed up. They've got a bunch of ships out of command up here because I've got different directions. Always a bad idea to get your ships facing not in a good column or line or whatever. Well, what this means is, well, I'm going to have to make a lot of die rolls now. It's only a 3 or less that I get them back in command. And if they remained out of command, well, some of them, not too big a deal, they can at least fire, but these guys won't even really be able to engage unless the French open them up as they did with this guy. So that could be a... aren't bad at all for the English. The 2 ships that aren't already engaged both made it. At a 50% when I'm only rolling for 4 spots, 0 for 3, that's pretty good. Okay, the French got the initiative and they passed by this, shooting its rigging up some more. They've dismasted another ship, so they've got 2 that are vulnerable to striking due to being dismasted. I noticed there had been a fire on this one that I had forgotten to roll for. A lot of little stuff in the cleanup phase that sometimes I might miss, and well, I rolled for it later, and that's fine. So now that puts it on the English hands. Damned if I know what to do. Got it. English chose to shoot one of their out-of-command ships, and I think I forgot this last time. This is only a partial broadside, so it actually should have done less damage. I have no idea last time, but I handled it this time correctly. It's a partial broadside because I could only see one of the 2 hexes of that ship. Very easy to forget these little things if you're not used to the game. But, yeah, it kind of makes sense that that wouldn't be a full broadside. It's just... sometimes it's hard to see what's going on and remember the rules at the same time. Oh well, I did more damage last time, but this time I caught it. Now the French have the opportunity to go again, and they're going to take it. I'm not sure what they're going to do. This guy's already fired. So actually, I may want to force the English to go. The problem with doing so is this ship can come in and shoot, but these guys have already moved. So there's no real big issue there. The only real issue is what I do with my 2 commands, and I'd rather not telegraph that to the English. You get a massive aft rake on this ship as they pass by it. setting it on fire, wounding the captain. Not a good situation, but now it's back in the French initiative, and they must take it now because that was not an out of command ship. Jeez. All my good options are gone, essentially. I gotta bring these back around into play somehow. I'm not sure how to do that. I guess the only way is to turn them in and move them this way, beating just like the British. Finish up with the French kind of pushing their way back in the opposite direction. This squadron's heading this way while this one's heading this way. The English have turned in. They have the wind. Well, both sides have the wind to their advantage. Right now this is kind of nice for the French, and they took a free shot with this one. They're holding fire with this guy because that should be his first fire, but this guy's already fired his starboard guns before. The English are holding fire. They don't want a partial broadside as their first shot. They're planning on really hammering this little squadron here. The French seem so disorganized in terms of broken into different pieces that I think the English are going to do quite well here. We have the cleanup at the end of the turn, some fires and crap like that. I'll come back after I clean that. And with 2 more turns to go, not much happened of any excitement. We got a couple of 3 dismasted English ships here, but none of them struck. Most of them on a 4 or less they would have gone, but they didn't. Got this guy burning down. He's not in good shape. Basically this mess here, a lot of stuff that's just drifting with the wind. Anyway, moving into turn 9. That's probably it for tonight. I'm compiling the thumbs list right now. I like to update it every now and then. It's gotten kind of ugly now because everything changes. I should just start all over each time, but I forget that every other time or so. Been getting up and going to sleep earlier each day recently. Weird situation. Anyway, I've got a lot more time this morning than I usually do, but I didn't get much done last night. Set up the command decision points. They were fairly easy for both sides. Everything's in command. The English, all this is commanded from this ship. Now that's dismasted, but he couldn't get off of it last turn. And Bing's command is all facing the same way now. So that's kind of a sweet recovery of positioning there. Of course, the French are going every which way. They won the initiative though, and let's see what they can do. Really a tough situation because 2 of the French squadrons are vulnerable. This one up here and this one. This one maybe not so much. Really only this ship looks like it's really threatening these guys. These guys are threatened by this whole line here. But they have more of an opportunity that after the British move, maybe they'll be able to come in and do their own damage. I don't know. Push their lead squadron out, getting firing opportunities against these ships. This one took a bit of a hammering. It's already on fire, but it took more of a hammering as it tried to extricate itself. That puts it back on the English. We only have 2 commands now. English started turning the units from this earlier vanguard to become the chasers in this case. Now a couple of these are dismasted, one of which includes their admiral in that section of the fleet. He hasn't been able to get off the ship. The French move this line forward, figuring they can keep a defensive position and keep their reaching wind orientation as the better option. Anything they did with these seemed kind of way too premature at this point because they might be tacking with those or who knows, and that forces the English to move Bing's squadron. The English form a parallel line with the French, trading fire across here. Overall, the English get the better of it. Both are playing to their strength here, but the French have to fire at rigging, whereas the English get to fire at hull. And hull tends to just be better because it starts to sink the ships. You can make some arguments for shooting the rigging being good. For one thing, it makes it more possible to capture enemy ships rather than just destroy them. But anyway, we have one last French squadron, this kind of lost squadron going the wrong way, beating into the wind. Let's see what we can do with them. Might involve tacking. Not to tack, the scenario's only got one more turn, I'm not going to have the time to kind of spin around and engage these guys. If they break through for whatever reason, I've got my guns facing. More importantly, I can come in and hit these ships here. Anyway, kind of fits that La Clue doesn't have one. And now let's see. I'll do the post-turn cleanup, and I'll come back. And I may have time to finish this up this morning. I think that pretty much covers everything. Fire was put out. That ship's vulnerable to striking. Of course, the dismasted ships are vulnerable to striking, but none did. We're moving into the final turn of this scenario. Looks like a British victory so far. I don't see it being too easily turned over. It's not terribly conclusive in the sense that both sides are still on the on the water fighting, and neither side has really trashed the other fleet. That's one of the things I think the time limit does, is it prevents these games from becoming ahistorical fight to the death. Some of that may be that the battle ends at night or something, but some of it is simply the tendency of being able to get away, both psychologically, the leader wanting to break off combat at a certain point, and the unwillingness to follow with damaged ships and chase it to the full extent. And that's kind of an artificial piece added to games like this. You'll see it in a lot of war games, though, not necessarily where there's a time limit, but if you let players do what they want to do, they don't do what commanders historically did. So in terms of pursuing and continuing the battle, etc., the guy with the advantage will continue and try to wipe out the enemy. The other guy may not break off. He may try to win the scenario. And this is the kind of ahistorical thing that's, in this case, almost baked into the game in a way that I don't understand how you're supposed to not have that take place. All right. Anyway, on to the final turn. Okay, so after the initial turn prep, divisions for the French, it was pretty easy. These two ships are kind of their own little world, even though they could have been included in this command. I've got an extra commander there, and it's always good to have more commands. This squadron obviously has to be its own because it's facing a different direction. For the English, Bing over here has his little command pretty well defined. This one, 1, 2, 3, he's able to command this entire group just by being in radius, which is kind of nice because they're facing every which way. That left two ships out of command, both succeeded, and the English got the initiative, so they get to do... You know, initiative's less of an advantage, though, in the advanced with the defensive fire. It's a bigger deal, a much bigger deal. It's still probably to your advantage to go first, but it's probably a much bigger deal in the basic game where you can control the pace of who gets to fire when. Still, without those advanced game defensive fire rules, or the advanced defensive fire rules, this game would be very silly, I think. Very much the same way Fighting Sail is, and I would strongly suggest modding Fighting Sail to include something. One thing I forgot, this turn was divisible by 5, so there was a wind adjustment check. It didn't end up changing, which is a good thing because the Brits are, for the Brits at least, because the Brits are pretty happy with what the situation is right now. A quick switch could have changed the effectiveness of these guys, for example. English kicked things off by moving one of their loose ships, the Trident, through. Pounds this thing. It got to fire on both sides, though, as it fired as the bow was being crossed, and then afterwards it got to fire. But the British did a lot more damage. That thing's ready to sink now. And then some fire on this. Long-range fire that didn't do much. Really no great hope there of anything exciting happening. Now we're over to the French, and they have all just big commands, so they'll be moving something fairly impressive no matter what. I'm not sure which one. I kind of am tempted to move these guys back here. Gotta check. People have noted that, you know, my whole mood, everything's gotten a lot better. Yeah, it's gotten a lot easier. It's still a little fiddly, but I can cope with it. I guess it's one of the things with the newer games, and everything that most people are interested in is a newer game, but newer to me, it tends to be very hard to learn. And in something like this, there's a big curse factor to that first thing. I actually was considering not doing the rules introduction on this one until after I had played some, and I think that would have been a lot easier. Of course, after I play it, I make up my own kind of rules because I don't want to look things up constantly, so that it ends up being a little bit, that makes the game smoother, but I end up maybe becoming disconnected with the real rules. I know that happened with SPQR, Musket and Pike, and some others. And then at some point after I've played enough scenarios, I come back to what the real rules are, and I say, aha, I've been playing this wrong. So, you know, it's just one of the costs to the way I handle things, and you're better off looking at the older games if you want sort of more informed views of both the rules and the game itself. I can give a fair impression in the review, but when I'm doing the introduction, when I'm doing the playthroughs, they're going to be spottier in these games. All right, I got time for some more, but I don't think I'm going to finish it up in the morning here. Maybe if I get a break downloading stuff for processing. Let's see what the French rear squadron passes up, and actually this one, the Sage, this thing is vulnerable to sink, actually. So the English ignore this hulk, but they took fire with a couple of ships on the Redoubtable, which also managed to get an afterrake on this thing to not much effect, and fire on this. Again, the long-range fire doesn't do much, but the hope is this is already a damaged ship. It could end up in worse shape, say sunk, by the amount of hits it's taking. We're back on the English. They don't have a lot to do. No, they have several commands, actually. They have this rear command I haven't activated yet, and it's hard to remember what's been activated and what hasn't. Unlike SPQR, there's no flip over after you move. If you're sitting there playing a single turn in a setting, that's fine, but I like to walk away, and will have to very shortly, and it'll be hard to remember that. English choose to essentially pass again by activating this dismasted ship. It could fire at this point, but it's got no real, I'd have a partial broadside on that. I might as well. So the French move their, I don't know what to call this squadron at this point, but forward, and you can see they're not worried about facing anymore. This is the last turn of the game. You could say that's kind of unrealistic, but really the battle is breaking up. If there is any reason for the battle to be ending, like nightfall, I suppose it kind of makes sense that you'd be able to do this and then reform later. But as it is, it feels kind of artificial, because some battles did extend into nightfall. If you were this close in a battle, it feels like it would continue. I don't know. Anyway, but we discussed that earlier in the video, or in the series, that the games have these artificial endpoints to them. Some battles go into the night, very few do, but it's not up to the players to make that decision, like a lot of other things in wargaming in general. Fire was really kind of not even a Hail Mary, just a matter of, geez, I probably can't do anything. Not managing to damage them, doing hull shots from two big ships. Got a third ship here. If this tries to cut across and rake this one, which it may well do, but it's really unlikely to damage this one as well, then I would be able to fire straight into that, and that would improve my odds. But I'm not terribly impressed with what more can be done over in this sector. The ships are pretty much invulnerable to taking further damage. This one could strike. It could, if it took fire, it could sink, so it sailed along behind, taking protection of the rest of the fleet. Damned if I know which Brits I've moved and which I haven't, though. no marker for who moves and who doesn't. I should have put something down because the battle at this stage in the game gets complex enough. The lines are all broken up. And that may be actually why the battle gets called, in a sense, is that you can no longer maintain the command structure. But there would still be isolated pockets trying to fight while the rest of the fleet is withdrawing for the night to try to reorganize. The English sail by with concentrated fire against something I can't pronounce, and I shouldn't even try. Foudroyant, including attempted rakes and one successful. They managed to get enough fire in there to manage to actually cripple it or put it on its damage side. Puts it on the French. They only have one squadron left, this one here. I'm not sure what to do with it. It's been sort of this game of chicken where the British don't want to move until the French move, and they've had the ability to determine, because of all the commands they had due to the out of command risks, they've had the ability to hold off, so they're going to get the last move over here. That's not a terribly good situation for the French, but they may still try to close and damage those English ships some more. It's unlikely the English are going to be able to actually damage one of the French. The French push forward. This column kind of collapsed in on itself to get fire on this, and they managed to put it on fire and damage it. It's not going to get weak enough that it has to strike, but getting it damaged is worth some victory points, I believe. This one has not fired. It's hoping to at least get a pass-by shot on one of these English ships. Probably can't sink this one, but it might be able to make it strike. I don't know if that's worth anything. This one, it almost certainly cannot damage far enough. So I probably should have launched fire on that, but if they turn in to attack me, I want to get my shot off, and I've got as good a shot after it moves as I do right now. That's the last move for the turn, is going to be those English ships, and then we do the cleanup. The English were able to coordinate all their fire from these ships on, what is this? Content. Including way back here, sort of a partial broadside. It had almost no chance of hitting, but firing from a great distance. On a low, actually it's not that bad with the pluses, but they missed. They weren't able to create a damaged level to that ship. Now I'll do the cleanup, see how the fire works, whether anything new strikes, and then try to figure out what the victory condition, or what the victory conditions turn out as. Some exciting things happened during the post situation. The fire was put out on the one English ship with some additional rigging damage. This one broke up and is sunk now. Of course did the drifting, even though it has no effect on determining the victory, just because I wanted the ending to be perfectly as it would be. Consider that an OCD factor. Two of the English ships struck colors, and the French ship that sunk took Glandevise down with it. I've got to count the values now. Captured ships are worth twice their point value. There aren't any. The struck ships aren't captured. They're just waiting to be captured. But the battle's ended. Sunk ships are going to be worth their victory point value straight up. And damaged and dismasted ships are worth half. The commander himself will be worth his 3 victory points that he's listed. I don't know which way it's going to go. There are certainly more sunk French ships, but there may be more damaged British ships. It looks like there's quite a few that have taken heavy damage. I think it's going to still go for a British victory, but it's going to be a close thing. Looking at the aftermath of the battle, the point score, 19 points the French lost, 14 the English lost. So it's a significant English victory, but it would be pretty mild if it hadn't been for the 3 points for one of the admirals dying. The French did a little bit more damage to English ships. Had like 20 points worth of English ships either damaged or dismasted. I forgot about the dismasted being in there. But the French lost more ships in terms of sunk. Pretty much even the dismasted ships, the dismasted and damaged ships are probably in pretty bad shape where they have to get out of there. I don't know. it's hard to justify that 2-to-1. I mean, if you have damaged ships that need to be repaired, and assuming they can make it back to port and get repaired, assuming they're still semi-afloat, and of course anything that's taken so much damage that it's going to sink anyway should count as sunk. I don't think we have that issue in any of these. But the damaged ships you can assume are going to be pulled back to port and repaired. They probably cost a lot less to the country that lost them than fully losing a ship and having to rebuild it. But I'm not sure what the costs on rebuilding half a ship are. Some games make, the repair of a ship about equal to half the cost of the ship. So who knows? It would strike me that it's significantly less, though, in terms of the total manpower. An interesting thing to look at is every single ship engaged and at least fired one shot from one side. Many of them, but especially the French, managed to fire from both broadsides, which is a nice thing to... There's a lot of English ships, a significant number, a few French, that didn't manage to get a shot off from both broadsides. And there's a +2 bonus on that, so if you're playing with that rule, it's kind of important to do that. I don't know what I can take from it, Bing probably wouldn't get executed for this, except for the fact that, his column didn't stay together. It's definitely an issue with the game for me. But there's a fine thread. Somebody brought this up, that, these ships really moved into battle in formation and remained in formation through most of the battle. And you don't see that in this game, and you don't see that in Fighting Sail. And you certainly don't see that in Wooden Ships and Iron Men. But the reality is the battle that you've got is a little off from what the historical battles generally tend to be. There's a little, even with this game, which has its rules that help you keep your formation together in terms of the commands, etc. This is still a little bit too flexible, maybe. The commanders are too willing to break their fleets apart. And more importantly, too willing to keep a small command pocketed around themselves in a sense of chaos like happened over here. Those would be rare. But that's the thing, they're rare, they're not impossible. There were naval battles that degenerated into these mass melees of ugliness and confusion. They weren't always textbook examples of two lines going against each other, either in line of battle or column of battle. So, you're left with do you outlaw breaking formation in the general case? Or do you allow it to an unreasonable extent? I don't know if there's a way, I can't think of a way, to make it less likely to happen but still plausible than happens in this game. And I think there's going to be too much of a desire to break commands up, especially when and to create some chaotic melees, especially when you have a significant number of commanders to ship ratio, where you've got a good reason. Now that actually shows some capability on the side. Anyway, that's just some starting thoughts. I'm actually going on to the next battle. I'll load this one up at this point. And again, I don't really know what could have been done. It looked like the Brits were winning this from early on. They have a significant advantage overall, as far as I'm concerned, in the game with their bonus on shooting at the hull. Their doctrine is a tremendous advantage in terms of scoring the battles in this game. And likewise, the French advantage of shooting at the rigging clearly doesn't work as well, and historically I think it shows up that it doesn't work that well in terms of destroying enemy ships, but often it would work well enough in terms of, and maybe this is where the dismasting comes in, wrecking the ships so that they could no longer pursue the goals that they were going under. Is it easier to dismast than to sink? Yeah, it feels a little bit easier, so it's kind of a nice option, but I don't think it's terribly easier to dismast something as a French ship than it is to damage something as an English ship, and you're getting the same point value for those two actions. One thing that's nice about dismasting, though, is you can go after the big ships, and it only takes 15 rigging hits. Whereas going after a big ship like this sucker, well, you're looking 25 hits on the hull. So 13 will damage it, but it's still a mobile and effective platform, whereas dismasting makes something available to strike and not really as involved in the battle. It's difficult to get those ships to fire. So there is definitely an argument for the French doctrine there, but I think history shows that the English doctrine worked better, and I think the game kind of handles that nicely. Again, just some thoughts. Might come up with more things, might get argued out of those thoughts by people who know more, because certainly I know very little about a lot of things.